Welcome to the Architect of Resilience podcast, where we explore the secrets of overcoming life's challenges and unlocking unstoppable strength through deep personal conversations and expert insights.
Yeah, let's talk a little bit about kind of insulin mimemic or other pathways for shuttling carbohydrates and improving insulin, dropping inflammation levels. You were just reading a piece this morning on metformin, which is metformin's a pretty widely promoted product, definitely very effective in diabetes management, but it's been pushed in the anti-aging, longevity, and also really heavily for cancer. And it looks like that piece that you're reading is suggesting that that there's really no impact on cancer whatsoever.
Yeah, it looks like, and I just took a quick glance at it, so I'm going to read it in a little bit more detail later. But the Cliff Notes version is there wasn't even a casual benefit for anti-cancer. And I think, like, if I'm kind of thinking this through critically, it comes back to the importance of balancing AMPK and mTOR. You don't want too much mTOR, you don't want too much AMPK. And the whole importance of balancing oxidation and redox in a cell too. That when we look at something like metformin, we're still kind of learning how those work, but it appears there's a shift in the microbiome, and that helps with insulin sensitivity. I think where people kind of made that leap in terms of judgment is that by essentially driving that AMPK pathway, which I explained to people, easy way to sort out all the letters and numbers. Think about you're driving a car, and if you're burning fuel too fast, you step on the brake, AMPK, that's going to slow things down so you can use that fuel a little bit more efficiently and get reacclimated to using it the right way. Whereas, if there's nobody around, full tank of gas, pedal to the metal, and that's mTOR. And both of them have their place, but if we're going all AMPK and we're really focused on that, especially in the people that are probably gravitating towards this as an anti-cancer treatment, my personal thoughts are that these are people that don't have a lot of muscle mass. These are probably people that aren't really eating a whole lot of food. So I don't know how much of an issue the insulin sensitivity is in the first place. And then to further drive that AMPK pathway, instead of focusing on something like muscle, which is truly the currency of aging for so many reasons, I think that maybe they're headed in the wrong direction.
Yeah, that's something that I have mixed feelings. Like I said, well, one, if we talk about metformin, I think that there's some positive impacts that it has on the gut microbiome, and that's where we're seeing a number of those benefits. At the same time, we always see some disturbance in the GI as it relates to any of these insulin mimemics, right? Mm-hmm. But the AMPK signaling is a really interesting, component, and I think it's really important when we look at that and what choices we're doing, whether someone is hormonally supported or not. Because when we signal, so AMPK signaling is, essentially, preservation of energy, right? So if we're in like a starvation mode, the body is trying to preserve its energy, and the output of that is that it downregulates mTOR because muscle protein synthesis is such a high energy demand mechanism that it essentially shuts down mTOR or in our ability to add muscle mass. But at the same time, it's creating an environment that is actually really beneficial for gaining muscle because we're reducing our blood glucose levels, we're reducing inflammatory. We've got inflammatory suppression going on. So we create this really positive environment. So as a whole, products like Berberine, banaba leaf, so on, alpha lipic acid, these all have a pretty substantial impact on reducing, improving our makeup, our body composition. But at the same time, if you're not hormonally assisted, it really shuts down a lot of your ability to add muscle mass to your frame. So
Yeah.
so I'm always, I've used these products for a long time, 20 plus years, 25 years. I've been playing around with numbers of different ones, and actually with USP Labs, they had a few different insulin. Anabolic pump was one, I think, in 2007. It was a really great product, and then they had this P-Slin product, which was a higher, carb shuttling. Anyway, before that, dealing with all sorts of alpha lipic. What are your thoughts on that?
Let's dive into the world of optimizing your overall health. With pushing my physical limits, I encountered significant reductions in my health, and I reached out to Merrick Health as the premier telehealth service. I loved their personalized health coaching from the comfort of my home. They empower you with the choice of self-service diagnostic labs, or what I chose, the guided optimization with expert interpretations of blood work, health coaching, and with medications delivered to my door. Merrick Health is your partner in optimizing your health. Listeners can seize a fantastic 10% discount off their first blood work with code RESILIENCE at merrickhealth.com. That's code RESILIENCE for 10% off.
Yeah, I think maybe it'd be beneficial to kind of explain like the different pathways that kind of get glucose into the cell. And then I think that'll kind of give people an idea of why you got to pick the right tool for the right job. And when I think about it, glycolysis is kind of like the first highway, and it's going to be the main road. Glucose, or really any type of sugar, is going to get broken down, made into energy. And when you eat food, what happens then is this glucose is going to enter your bloodstream, and it's going to be delivered to your cells. And then when it's inside the cells, glucose is going to go through glycolysis, which is basically like breaking down into even smaller pieces. And that's where that ATP is produced. And then we've got pyruvate, and that's kind of like, you call it like a traffic controller. And at the end of glycolysis, what's happening is this glucose gets turned into pyruvate. And when it's in the cell, it has to decide where the pyruvate's going to go. And this is going to be based on the amount of oxygen that's available. So if there's plenty of oxygen, pyruvate's going to take this highway to the mitochondria, powerhouse of the cell. And we'll be covering that in a couple podcasts and everything, so I won't go into much detail. And there's going to be even more energy production, and this is called aerobic respiration, and kind of like the zone 2 people talk about, and there's a ton of ATP. Now, if there's not enough oxygen, like during hard exercise, pyruvate's going to be turned into lactic acid, and this goes through the lactic acid cycle. And it's kind of like taking a detour, going back to our highway analogy. So it's still going to give you energy, but not as much, and it can cause muscle fatigue. So then we have glucose alanine cycle, which is sort of like a side street from muscle fuel. And when your muscles need energy and don't have enough oxygen or glucose available, they can use amino acids, just kind of those building blocks of protein. And through the glucose alanine cycle, in this pathway, the muscle is going to send alanine to the liver, and the liver is going to turn into glucose and send it back to the muscle. It's kind of this way of making the body recycle and keep energy flowing, especially during like intense exercise. And then, of course, we've got the Cori cycle, and that's going to be the recycling of lactic acid. And when muscles produce this lactic acid, and this is going to be in a low oxygen environment, the liver is going to step in and help. And it takes that lactic acid, converts it back to glucose, sends it into the muscles, and this recycling, it's the Cori cycle. I kind of remember that like recycle, Cori cycle. It's going to help keep the muscles working longer, even when the oxygen's low. So kind of to recap, glycolysis, you're breaking down the glucose, making energy. Pyruvate decides whether to go for more energy in the mitochondria or make lactic acid. And then that glucose alanine cycle and Cori cycle are kind of like backup plans that recycle those materials. So where this ties in when we're thinking about things like metformin, or brilliantly, you have lactate in one of your formulas. And when we're looking at kind of some of these other tools, you can kind of see, depending what's happening inside of that cell, maybe you do need to put more glucose in the cell, or maybe you need to be able to create energy with something like the lactate that you put in your supplement, or maybe you need to support various phases of this glucose alanine or Cori cycle. So I guess that's kind of my long-winded way of saying, while there's value to something like metformin, when we think about what it's doing, that shift in the microbiome, and on some degree improving our ability to get glucose into the cell, it's not necessarily creating more energy or ATP. And ultimately, like when we think about our energy, our function, everything, ATP is going to be that primary currency. So we want to support what's going to produce the most ATP.
All right, guys, we talk a lot about mental resilience on this podcast, but let's talk about another type of resilience. That's movement resilience. We want to move well, recover better, and do it for life. And it starts with your feet. And you can start today with Naboso. Naboso is a sensory technology company founded by a functional podiatrist. And all their products feature a texture to stimulate, strengthen, and awaken your feet. I use their splay toe spacers and Neuroball to release my feet at the end of every day. They also have these textured recovery socks that feel like a mini massage when you walk around. If you're looking for an effective way to bulletproof your feet, head to naboso.com, that's NABOSO.com, and use code RESILIENCE for 20% off.
So interesting discussion. I wish I had my notes prepared. So we started, we got in a tangent discussion and decided to just record on this, and we haven't done any preparation, but I would really like to get your input on an extract from fenugreek. And obviously I've got some bias in this, and I've done a significant amount of research on this in past years. I haven't looked at this for, over 2 years since I released the product, but in fenugreek, there is a compound called 4-isoleucine, 4-HIL. And so that 4-HIL does the upregulation of the GLUT4 and the GLUT12 receptors. And I'll have to pull up my research and send it to you to take a look at this. And then downregulates the receptors in the fat tissue, right? And a lot of, insulin mimetics do that, but they're also signaling AMPK. It doesn't appear that 4-HIL works in that fashion. So we've got the upregulation of the receptors. We do have the same pro-inflammatory suppression, which again, all of these, I do believe, like berberine, so on, they all are going to, have an impact on inflammatory diseases, cancer, things of those nature. And I'll send you some pieces on that. The 4-HIL, what's interesting is it works like another class of diabetes drugs. The sulfate, I believe it's the sulfate ones. Mm-hmm. So they cause the pancreas to release insulin, right? And those diabetes drugs are not used frequently because it can cause too much insulin release and create a dangerous environment. So, we've got this really unique, things happening with the 4-HIL. So we've got upregulation, of the GLUT4 and GLUT12 receptors in muscle tissue, downregulation in fat tissue. We have it impacting glucose absorption, so it inhibits glucose absorption, reduction in the pro-inflammatory, markers. So we've got suppression of inflammation, which is, again, that's going to create this environment that's positive for body composition. We've got the insulin release of the pancreas, which is then going to shuttle the carbohydrates. And with that, it does not it's kind of, as a supplement, a natural supplement, fenugreek, it's got it doesn't do the it has none of the negatives of that class of diabetes drugs. But at the same time, it has the impact of normalizing triglycerides, right? Because it's going to start metabolizing triglycerides, reducing fat absorption. Now, a lot of the studies on that are in rats, I have to admit. But to me, it's really fascinating. And so actually I spent years, I was wearing a blood glucose monitor, and I did it with other people. And that's how I developed the Glycohat product, because unfortunately fenugreek doesn't work itself because there's so many tannins on the seed that it causes massive GI distress at the dosage that you need. Like you're going to have cramping and it's terrible. And then the other is, when I was doing the research, and you can find it if you take, variety of fenugreek products, the amount of 4-HIL can vary from like 30% to 0.03%. Wow. So you have no idea what you're getting. So essentially, I just created I was able to get the source for the 4-HIL and bring that out. And so I created the product as a pre-workout pump product, because it's like you take it with a bunch of carbs before training, because it can shuttle a massive amount of carbs. So you're going to get these really great skin bursting pumps. It's going to work in combination, with these type products, right?
Yeah.
Really amplifying the effects of that, but to me, I would really love your insights on the thought process. I'll have to send you the research on this stuff, and I might be missing some things again, because this is just an informal discussion that we just kind of got in. But I've had experience with all of those products. Now, banaba leaf is another one. And I do have some banaba leaf in there. I have not seen banaba leaf. It's not very powerful. Yeah. But again, banaba leaf, I don't believe, my personal belief is that it doesn't work through the AMPK signaling. And I could be wrong on that, but that's been my experience. So I do have some banaba leaf in there as well. I played with all of these over the last 25 years. I'm sure you have too.
Oh, so. Yeah. I remember a long time ago in my Charles Poliquin days, when I was doing the biosignature, and the premise was that we have 12 body fat sites, and each one corresponds to a dysregulated hormone level, or rather an axis that looks at a ratio of 3 hormones for each of the 12 sites. And basically, what you do, you skin caliper somebody, and with biosignature, if they're holding fat in their suprailiac or southwest portion of their shoulder blade, poor insulin sensitivity. So the protocol that Charles would use, or one of the protocols that Charles would use, was fenugreek. He had a insulin sensitivity product that had the banaba leaf in it, and a couple other things.
Interesting. I had the Poliquin biosignatures done on me, and 15 years ago. Yeah.
Probably couldn't pinch anything.
I had a fair bit of fat, more so than now.
Yeah. It seems like I'll have to do a little bit more research on that. It's been a while since I revisited that compound.
I've got my research from that because like I said, I spent a couple years working on this. That's why I was able to go through a lot of it really fastly without prompting once I got into it. But I couldn't. I can't rattle off the studies, so I'll send those to you to review. Now, a number of those on some of the mechanisms of action are animal studies, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. That's why I did the testing in real life for a long period of time, to verify and essentially do that in person. I did that with half a dozen people as well. And you can just tell it when you take the product with carbs. You can feel those muscles out. So it's really cool in that regard. I'll get you some to play with, but I'd love to have you take a look at the research, and but I was just wondering your thoughts on kind of those mechanisms of action, because it's, if we're taking out that, we're improving cellular biogenesis, we're reducing inflammation, we're causing that insulin, release from the pancreas, which is a very different mechanism than all these other compounds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The, with the 4-HIL, I remember I had a acute anemia. It was like 2 years ago. And one of the things, obviously you had to get your hemoglobin back up. And the 4-HIL has a lot of benefit for that, as well as all the insulin sensitivity benefits that you talked about. It's really interesting compound. I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about it in the years to come. And you were, as always, ahead of the curve on that.
Yeah, no, it's really, really cool. But I'll use Berberine and other products when I've got somebody as well doing, somebody that's dealing with some insulin and sensitivity issues.
Yeah.
Yeah, all those are very viable, but I think it's just important for people to be aware of the potential impacts on reducing your ability to gain muscle, right?
Yeah.
And so understanding that, and then understanding that with a window, like I know bodybuilders that use metformin, they may use metformin on non-training days, and then, on training days not, or take it in the morning, and then train in the afternoon, or train in the morning with carbs, but then take the metformin in the evening, because again, they're trying to put that window that's going to reduce the muscle protein synthesis somewhere else. So
that
it's
makes
just
a lot
like,
of sense.
Just like you don't want to take a bunch of antioxidants, like right after you train, because we actually want the, that oxidative stress to stimulate the process. And so if we just go in there and kill that out, like we're killing the stimulus. So there's some timing components with that, right?
Yeah, it's the same thing with, and I know we'll do a podcast on this in the future with the senolytics that, especially like in a training population, thinking about the days that you're putting those on or when you're going to do your protocol is crucial because, as we mentioned, balancing that mTOR AMPK and making sure that you're not kind of offsetting what you're trying to do with like the senolytics or driving the AMPK pathway with the different signals coming in. If you can, they're always happening simultaneously, but I think about it almost like you're tilting a scale, and you want to kind of at some point or at sometimes, have it tilted a little bit more in favor of AMPK or tilted a little bit more in favor of mTOR.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, well, limiting. So again, like the anti-aging component, and that's where I think that the thought process has gone with the anti-aging, and it makes sense to me, right?
Yeah.
Like the less mTOR we have, also the less potential for growth of cancer, right?
Yeah.
So there's the whole population that minimizes their eating as a whole to extend their lifespan. Like, yeah, there's really proven aspects of that. But then if you don't have muscle mass on your frame, and something happens, you've reduced your lifespan, right? So it's like there's a lot of different pieces of that. Yeah, you've reduced that instance of cancer or some other related diseases from growth. So limiting that is there's theory of thought there. So yeah, I really think about the balance. That'll be a good discussion. We'll dive into that when we get into senolytics.
Yeah, it'd be a lot of fun.